Once we're already on the topic of finding money last week, we talked about a lot of concepts that could be relevant to a bunch of other cases. I figured we'd talk about one more money finding case, a much more common case, but just as complex, and try to use some of the info that we learned last week and see how that pertains to this case. So you have a shul, Beis Medrash. Happens, people are constantly in and out, and there's lost items there, lost money. Common case, happened many times. Someone finds a bill on the floor in the shul, on the seat in the shul, wherever it is. So sometimes you have places where there's hundreds of people, non-members, members, in different communities. Like it's going to be in Indianapolis in 2030. Tons of minyanim, tons of in and out, and the question is, can you keep the money? Why am I asking especially by a shul? Why is there specifically a question by a shul? So last week we learned there's a concept called kinyan chatzer, right? That one's property, one's courtyard, one's property, one's home, one's yard is able to acquire monetary items for them, even unbeknownst to them, even without their knowledge. Special halacha that applies specifically to one's property, specifically if it's secure, and as we learned at the end of last week, specifically if it's likely that they'll eventually, or normal that they'll eventually run into it and find it. So the question is, what happens with the shul? Is there an owner of a shul? Who owns the shul? Is there going to be a kinyan chatzer? Is there going to be an acquisition by the shul? Right? So let's say a person goes in, they see $50, they go over to Gad, say, President, found $50. Maybe you could send out in your email, or it won't send 50, it'll send that, found out some money, so someone could come and give a siman, where it was, how much it was, whatever the case will be. So Gad says back to him, well, you found it in the shul. It's ours now. It belongs to Congregation B'nai Torah. We have a shul. We have a board. I'm the president. And we could use the money. So who says that the money should go to you? Right? Last week we learned about a case where it goes into someone's backyard. Fenced in, it's secure, and it becomes owned by the owner of that property. And if someone who would go in and steal it from there, well, that would be considered stealing, even though the owner doesn't know that they own that money yet. So would we say the same thing by a shul? That would the shul become the entity? Would the entity of the shul become the owners of this money, and the person who found the money in the shul would not be able to keep it? Or is there any other considerations? So I guess just to try to define it, who would we say is the owner of the shul? Who is the deed to the building?
The board.
The board. Is a board a group of people? So maybe we would say that a shul is like a shutfus, a partnership. Maybe it's like a partnership. Like if two people, Reuven and Shimon, would own a house, and something would go into their house, would the shul be like that? The shul will say that all the board members, maybe or all the owners, something of that sort, all are partial owners of the shul. Maybe we'll say that the kahila, sorry? So we would have to, it would be dependent on the shul, and it would be very complicated, dependent on exactly how that shul was developed, and what exactly it means to be a member. What exactly it would take to be ownership would be questionable, but it would definitely be a group of people, and it would be like a shutfus. It would be like a partnership. So what is the halacha if there's a partnership that in their chatzer turned up some money? Is that or any lost item? Would their chatzer, would their property acquire possessions for them? So this is a discussion in Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch talks about a case where Reuven rented out part of his house to part of his building to Shimon. So let's say he has a basement apartment. He rents it out to Shimon. He owns the top floor. He stays on the top, and the backyard is shared by the two of them. A common case. And in this backyard, which is shared by the two of them, $50 landed. So the Shulchan Aruch says that this owners joint together are kona together. The chatzer is both of theirs, so the chatzer will acquire, the backyard will acquire for the two of them, and they'll both become the owners in the $50, which means they'll split it 50-50. They each get $25. That's what the Shulchan Aruch says, and that's how the Ramah explains it. The Ketos HaChoshen, famous sefer on Choshen Mishpat in the 1800s, he says that partners can't have a kinyan chatzer. This goes already a little bit complicated into the mechanics. What is the idea behind kinyan chatzer? Every other type of kinyan, every type of acquisition, you have a person, who's basically with his mind doing some type of formal action, pulling something, buying something, lifting something. These are different types of kinyanim, different types of acquisitions that someone does to acquire something using a combination of a physical action, something which shows ownership, and at the same time their das, their mind, their knowledge, and their desire to acquire. So when you're talking about a chatzer, it doesn't really fit any of the regular rules. And how exactly does it work? So the Gemara discusses, is the chatzer like an extension of the person's hand? Maybe that's how we should view it, like what your property works for you. So it's like your property is like an extension of you monetarily, and therefore it's able to acquire for you. Or is it like an agent? The Gemara says maybe it's like a shliach. And just like a shliach, an agent can acquire on behalf of someone else, so maybe naturally one's property is like an agent for them. So the Ketos HaChoshen argues that you can't have a yad, you can't have a hand if it's owned by multiple people. You can't. The whole idea doesn't apply basically, and that's the ruling of the Ketos HaChoshen. So according to, if you would have a partnership, so you'd have this machlokes between the Ramah and the Ketos. What would be the result of that? Probably you'd be allowed to keep it, because in the monetary laws, often when it comes to laws of isurim, of potential prohibitions, so if you have two opinions, especially if it's a matter of a deraisa, if it's a biblical isur, so if you have an equal suffix, so then you can't keep it. You can't do it. It's a suffix prohibition. Well, usually when it comes to monetary issues, there's no kula and chumrah. There's no stringency. It's just a matter of, does it belong to one person or the other? Everyone's really equal. So usually, possession dictates ownership until proven otherwise. That's the rule of hamoti mechavero olav haraya. If one wants to remove, transfer ownership from something else, they want to make a claim on someone else's property, the burden of proof is on the one who doesn't have possession of it. So over here, seemingly, if we would consider it like a partnership, a shul, if we would consider a shul like a partnership, so seemingly we would say, okay, the Ramah says that a partnership works. However, what's a little bit more complicated than a shul, about a shul, then let's say if our case was like in a firm, an office that had multiple owners, a building which had multiple owners, what's unique about a shul is that a shul is holy. A shul has kedusha to it. Why is that? Why does that make a difference? Because we find there's certain halachas that a shul has the laws of hekdesh. Hekdesh means it's property of above. Property. It's lofty property. It's owned by the Beis Medrash. When there's Beis Medrash, that would be one easiest way, I guess, to describe it. So when you talk about a shul, it's not just a regular partnership. It is a contribution of the whole tzibur to build something similar to a mikdash. It's not an actual Beis Hamikdash, but it's a mikdash ma'at. It has special kedusha to it. So the question becomes, maybe a shul is like hekdesh. Maybe a shul is like consecrated property, and it should not be like a regular partnership. So there is
in which case the money would go to the shul.
In which case the money would not go to the shul. Why? Because if you would have a regular partnership, so the Ramah tells us, okay, so you just have different people that are all contributing to one ownership. So at the end of the day, you have a regular mainstream ownership. It's owned by people. Happens to be there's 2 people instead of 1, or there's 100 people instead of 1.
It's not really owned. I mean, the board is legally responsible for it, but if you found $50, it's not like we divided it among ourselves.
Oh, exactly. That's exactly this point. That the shul is like a completely new entity. It's like the Beis Hamikdash. The Beis Hamikdash is not owned by. It's not like the entire Jewish nation. Everyone has like a small stock in the Beis Hamikdash. That's not how it works, right? The Beis Hamikdash is not owned by all of us, and we each have like a small stock. The Beis Hamikdash is its own entity. It has its own ownership. It's not human ownership. There is no human owner of it. It's a category of its own. It has no owners. I guess you could say Hashem is the owner in a certain respect, but Hashem obviously is not a person, doesn't have regular rules of ownership, and therefore it's like a completely different category. And if there's no human owner, so how could the chatzer work on behalf of anyone? It has no one to work for. Usually, if Rick has a chatzer, his backyard nicely fenced in, so his backyard works for him. Let's say chatzer works as a shlichus, so it's an agent. So just like an agent can be kona for Rick, so his backyard could be kona for him. But if the Beis Hamikdash, it doesn't have any ownership. It doesn't have a specific owner. It's a completely separate entity.
But couldn't it? I mean, whether it's Beis Hamikdash or the shul, I mean, $50. I mean, obviously it has needs. When it just that's like an extension of the community. It's not like the shul's pocketing it. It's going into maintenance of the shul or
the shul definitely has use for it. That's for sure.
Well, yeah, the shul has use for it, but I mean that use is really the benefit of the community. Which is the shul. I mean, they're so intertwined. Are they separate entities? They're not separate entities. That's a good question too. Okay,
that's a good point. So Jeremy's raising that maybe since there's beneficiaries of the shul acquiring the money, even though those beneficiaries aren't actual owners, but maybe since there are beneficiaries, maybe it should acquire. So it seems that the poskim are not comfortable with that because in order to have a legal acquisition, there has to be a legal owner. So we can't use let's call it the kehila. Let's say the board is the ownership. So unless the would be the potential, if we're going to say that the board doesn't actually own the shul, and that really the shul is more similar to the Beis Hamikdash, to hekdesh, then the fact that there's a side benefit to the board, that wouldn't be enough to give a legal status of an agent to the shul. So this is a big machlokas. Tosas in Bava Basra tells us about a case where a person consecrated made hekdesh, made a well into hekdesh. He said, this well that I have, I want to donate it to the Beis Medrash, and he said it's hekdesh. And the Gemara distinguishes between if there was something in the well at the time he consecrated it, or something came in afterwards. The Gemara says if at the time that he did it there was already water in there, or fish, or whatever it is that has value, so all of that becomes hekdesh. All of that has the regular laws of hekdesh. But if it came in after, at the time it was an empty well, and then all types of monetary wealth fell into this well, that would not be acquired by hekdesh, by the mikdash. So Tosfos comments and says that we see from here that the mikdash, because it doesn't have any real owner, it doesn't have a kinyan chatzer. Therefore, it doesn't have a kinyan chatzer. It can't have an agent because it doesn't have any real owner.
Why can't you say that if it's its own entity, it has its own
Agency.
not agency, but it has its own needs, and therefore it's so to speak a stam das, because you would assume that this is good for the entity, so therefore it wants to do that.
So I think what Chaim is arguing, that's really what the Ramban comes to argue on Tosfos. The Ramban says that it's true that the mikdash, that hekdesh, doesn't have a human ownership, but it still is an ownership. It still is an institution. It still is a entity which is capable of owning. It's an entity which is capable of having monetary ownership. So, says the Ramban, you don't need to be a human in order to have a chatzer. You just need to be an entity which is capable of owning. An entity which is capable of having property ownership. So the Ramban says that that hekdesh, the Beis Medrash, does have a kinyan chatzer, and he explains that Gemara differently. So this becomes a dispute between the Ramban and Tosfos. So based on this, the Agudah, which is one of the later Ashkenazi Rishonim, is quoted in the Magen Avraham, the most famous commentator on the regular laws of daily living. Most of Mishabura is based on the Magen Avraham, and the Magen Avraham brings this down, and he brings down this Agudah, which says that I think we can make a comparison between a shul and the mikdash. It's a little bit of a stretch, because the mikdash is the mikdash, hekdesh is hekdesh. A shul is not literally hekdesh. Thankfully for us, we don't want to have all the laws of hekdesh in our shul. That wouldn't be too good for us. All the laws of me'ilah, of trespassing. We try to keep the shul, in good condition.
We call it mikdash ma'at.
Oh, so we call it a mikdash ma'at. So the emphasis on the ma'at. It's a little bit of a mikdash. It's not really like it has sanctity to it, but it doesn't have the sanctity of the Beis HaMikdash. It's not a completely separate ownership. But the Agudah, and that's what the Magen Avraham says, is that we should treat it's enough of a sanctity. It's similar enough to the Beis HaMikdash that we should consider our shuls with that same status. And the Agudah, one of the Ashkenazi Rishonim, he follows the opinion of Tosfos, the greatest Ashkenazi of the greatest of the Ashkenazi Rishonim, and he says that just as Tosfos tells us that a chatzer does not work for the mikdash, so too a chatzer doesn't work for a shul. And therefore, the Magen Avraham paskins that if a person finds money in a shul, they are allowed to keep it. This is the conclusion of the Magen Avraham. This is brought down in Mishnah Berurah, and this is the baseline halacha.
What is the management of the shuls that would found objects?
Yeah, I guess they're
Management found the objects.
Say the janitor or some member of the shul or officer of the shul found the object, and it has some markings meaning that it could belong to somebody.
Well, is there a difference between money and objects? I guess
So the only difference would be if it's something which has a siman. if it's something which has a siman and has which goes into all the complex laws of hashavas, aveidah, of returning lost items, if it's something which typically could be returned to an owner, it could be identified and could be returned. So then they would have to, they would have to announce it and try to find the owner.
We do that with items, with clothes. So that periodically they get built up and I'll put them in. If you left anything, check it out, because if over a certain time, you're throwing it away.
Oh, so we have to have another shiur on that, which is that Rick is saying that a shul has a problem, that people and many other institutions also have a problem, which is that people people walk out without clothing on, exactly, like Dr. Miller is saying, and there's a buildup of stuff. And this is a big problem in a lot of institutions, and that's why it became very popular nowadays that institutions, we have this in yeshiva and many shuls throughout, especially in places where there's big crowds and big buildup of people, and people that come from all different places. They'll write a sign that says anything left here for more than 30 days, or sometimes they'll write anything left here at the end of the month, or whatever, however they want to set up their system. So they'll write that it becomes hefker. So that's a practice that the poskim, they accepted that as a good eitzah, or gave that eitzah. And what that does is that it basically avoids the whole question we have here. It would only obviously work once you reach that time, whatever the sign says. But once you would reach basically the assumption is that anyone who's coming in and using the shul and is able to see the sign, should see the sign, so they're agreeing, they're willing basically to forego on whatever they leave over, whatever mess they contribute to the coatroom or whatever else it is. Yeah. So we could stop here unless everyone wants to hear another case.
Kids are
Yeah.
Shul is compared to a big since there's no chatzer and sanctity. Make those show too, without a shul, there's no chatzer.
Right. That's the baseline halacha.
Like finding it on the street.
If it would be like finding something on the street, the only difference is that when you find something on the street, usually you have a lot less hashavas aveidah concerns. When you find something in shul, you know it's coming from a Jew, and it's usually easier to trace them back. So just in terms of the mitzias, more often you'll have a requirement of hashavas aveidah when you find something in shul. But if you find something without a siman, something which falls into the category which you assume that the owners gave up hope on, then that's true, exactly. Finding something in the shul would be the same as finding it in the street, as opposed to basically all other individually owned or even partnership owned institutions which don't have sanctity to them. One other detail, and this is, I don't have necessarily a bottom line on this, but this is something that posts can bring up and something to consider, is that which part of the shul has sanctity. The main sanctuary, okay, that has sanctity to it. The daily chapel, that also, these are places that are designated for davening. The Beis Medrash, the new Beis Medrash, that's that's designated for learning. What about the coatroom? What about the hallway? What about the playground? So this is an important detail. I forgot to mention this. That what would we say about those locations? Because there it's already a harder stretch to say that that's like a mikdash. The shul itself, that's where the similarity to the mikdash is, to hekdesh is, similarity to hekdesh. But these are just extensions that are necessary. They're necessary in order for the shul to function, but they don't have that, or seemingly they wouldn't have that sanctity to them. So some poskim want to distinguish and say this halacha is only going to be in the main shul. But if it's found in a coatroom, maybe the shul will be like a regular partnership in the coatroom. The coatroom will be like a regular partnership, and let's say there's 100 members that each own 1%. So anything found in the coatroom will be split amongst the membership. Or do you say that anything which is considered part of the shul, anything which is considered essential for the shul, should have that status of the mikdash? Okay, shkoyach everyone.
One more question. Is
Yeah.
there anything, like a shul would fall in this category, but other things like places that tend to have stuff left behind in them for maybe short periods of time or even longer periods of time, does that change the halakha at all? Because people come and go, maybe they travel through and they leave something here, it's kind of notorious for being a place where stuff gets kept, maybe even intentionally kept.
If they have their name on it, does that clean it up to make it different status?
Yeah, for sure. If they have their name on it, then there would be obligation to return it.
But,
Your question
but
is,
like the tali. I only come through every once a month or whatever, but my tali just looks like every other tali.
so therefore what? You're saying so maybe that should make it more.
So I'm asking, does that, because the shul, or if you look at some other building, like this, that people are coming and going through with frequency, and it's common to leave, articles behind, even with intentionality, safer or
Meaning that they're
they like to carry their stuff
they're-
when they're traveling, so they leave it here or whatever.
and they're planning on getting it back.
right, they think, well, I'll be here next month, and my stuff's there,
So you're saying in that case, would a person have a right to keep it?
Yeah, I'm asking, does that affect the halakha at all?
Right.
So
So
versus like something that's like nobody ever leaves stuff here overnight. like,
Right. So that would for sure be true. Like
Would
our
the
example.
people in the building have any way to know that person was going to the tree?
So sometimes you could have things which are unclear, but sometimes, very often, you could judge it based on what the societal norms are. For example, in the case we discussed tonight, no one leaves over $50, in the shul on the floor. So you know that that's a lost item. But you could have something which is called derech hinua, which means it's the way of how you leave it around. The placement of it and the way that it was left tells us that it's clear that the owner is going to come back to it at some point. So the Gemara says that anything which is derech hinuach, which is clearly you can determine from the way that it was left, from the way that it was placed, that this is an item that someone's planning on getting back to at some point, then you have to leave it as is. The only time that would get complicated is with Rick's example, where the shul puts out a sign and says, you can't leave it till this past month, and at the same time I see that this person left it intentionally, so that's where it'll get complicated. But in a regular case,
So back to the money saver. So I'm walking out the door and there's $50 on the lobby floor. Okay, so I'm allowed to keep it, but by the strict halakha. But some things, right? There's it's like, well, the halakha is this, but by the heavenly court, really you should do this. It's 30. It's still completely fine. Don't even
so
think about it.
that's a very good question.
Because obviously somebody didn't mean to leave the money there. Like they're getting their gloves out of their coat and they're walking out the door.
That's a very good question.
If it's in a random spot and not clearly intended to be in that spot, then it's probably an accident.
If it was not intended to be there,
If it looks like it's randomly laid out in some location, it's not.
meaning it looks like it fell.
Yeah.
It looks like it was lost, right? So that would be like Jeremy's case. So the halacha would be like this: if you have our cases that we're discussing here, is that you have a right to assume that the owner gave up hope because you're not really able to find the owner. Like for example, in many shuls in Lakewood, New York, even Baltimore, you find a bill in this location, like you have no chance that you're gonna find it's like if there's no chance. So it has to be a case like that, because if there's a chance that you could find the owner, and there's a chance that the owner can identify the item, then that's regular halacha of hashavas aveidah, and a person would have to do it. In terms of where you'd have your question is, let's say the case that we discussed. Let's say there's a machlokes. According to one opinion, you're allowed to keep it, and according to another opinion, it belongs to either someone else, or it belongs to the shul, or it belongs to the institution. So you have a split of opinions. So that's where you'd have your question that do you say, like, let's say I don't know if something is allowed to be done on Shabbos. So someone tells me, oh, that's a big dispute between posek A and posek B. He holds that it's considered chilul Shabbos. You're not allowed to do that on Shabbos, and posek B holds, that they are. And neither of them are my particular posek, and they're equal and everything. So we have a rule that you should follow the stringent opinion. You really, in that case, you'd have to follow the stringent opinion. And then even if you have, let's say, two opinions that hold that it's permitted, and one opinion that holds that it's not permitted, so there you have an idea also that if applied properly is an idea of what you're saying is called like a stringency. Like in Shemayim, I'm concerned that maybe really that one opinion is right. The person has that feeling like maybe that one opinion is right on the matter. However they get. So that gets into the idea of chumras. And when we're talking about isurim, it's very more common that you'll have an interest or a value in trying to cover that other opinion. But when it comes to this, when it comes to monetary matters, so there's really it's very different, because once there's no such thing as suffix zela, suffix theft, doubtful theft, being usher, which is a very interesting thing if you think about it. Like, let's say I found this thing in this shul, and I'll say, well, let's say according to what we learned tonight, so maybe according to the Ramban, who holds that hekdesh has a yad, so according to the Ramban, maybe the shul acquired it. That seemingly what would be the halacha. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't rule like that. The Magen Avraham doesn't rule like that. But according to the Ramban, the shul acquired it. So would I have like a value to, I guess what you're saying, like to cover that opinion the same way that I would? So there are times where you have it in monetary matters. Usually you don't, because even if that opinion is right, once the Bezdin or once the halacha determines that out of doubt I don't have to return it, then it doesn't matter whether that opinion is right or not.
But I thought in because when it laws of rivet interest, that I was thinking there was a halakha that I don't call the details of it specifically, but I think if interest was accidentally paid or something like that,
That you have a chiyuv l'tzis yidei shemayim.
right? But you're not. But the Beit Din can't require.
The Bezdin can't require you to do it, right? So by ribis, it's a little bit different, because ribis is really not. It's not a theft issue. Ribis is a isser issue. This is a little bit indicative if you learn Hilchos Ribis, so you see it's in the halachas of Yoredeya, which has the laws of kashrus, the laws of nida, the laws of what foods you can eat, all those types of how shkita works, all those types of laws. It's not in Choshen Mishpat, which deals with Bezdin, with court cases, and
It's not really
and that's because ribis is not it's not really or at least it's not limited to a monetary isser, because as evidenced by the fact that even if I tell you I want a ribis deal, Jeremy, I want you to lend me money and I want to pay you back ribis, and it's a good deal for me. It's 100% a good deal for me. I know that I'm giving you ribis and everything, and it's still worth it. It's still usher. Every other monetary case, every other monetary dealing, there's always a concept of mechila, which means that as long as the party knows what he's getting into and he agrees to it, it's 100% mutter. Ribis is a special scriptural decree that really is beyond regular monetary law, really similar to those laws of kashrus and something which a Torah forbids without the regular monetary rules. When you're dealing with the regular monetary rules, so there's less of an idea of I want to be latzis yedei shemayim, like you're quoting that Gemara of latzis yedei shemayim, to fulfill the possible requirement that maybe in shemayim really this opinion is right and the other opinion is wrong. When it comes to monetary things, there's a concept of mechila. So the other party is, so to speak, forced into being local because the halacha dictates that he doesn't get the money. And once that happens, so there's nothing happening. When it comes to a matter, let's say of kashrus, right? So I don't know if this thing is kosher. One opinion says yes, one opinion says no, and for whatever reason, really the halacha dictates I could follow the lenient opinion. But if in Shemayim really the strict opinion is right, so when I'm eating it, I'm eating something which is not kosher. When it comes to a monetary case, even if the other opinion is right, since the Beis Din paskins on it that the money's mine, and the other party has to go with that. So it's similar to the concept of mechila, that there is no isser. Even if in Shemayim we'll find out that really the other opinion is right, there's no isser over here, because the Beis Din determines where the money goes. So if the Beis Din determines that the money goes to me, even if it was based on an opinion that Shemayim will end up telling us at the end of our lives, really, it's not like that. There's still no isser done. There was no gzela. It's not like it'll turn out, oh, I was really using someone else's money. The money legally is mine based on what it's a very fundamental distinction between monetary law and isser v'heter and those types of laws.
So then back to the $50 in the lobby thing. So obviously Indianapolis is not very big. We get some travelers, but it's almost certainly somebody from the community. And $50, they're probably going to come back for it. So they haven't given up hope. I think, I had it for Mecha, and it's not there when I got
100%.
home.
100%. I don't.
Across the country, it's probably worth it to come back.
Well, but that's what I'm saying. Indy's not like a huge community where there's tons of people traveling.
You'll basically
through it.
always be able to find the owner.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. That's why I said only
And
20.
they're likely to come back because home's 5 minutes away, and they realize that $50 fill out.
Right.
No.
So I don't think it would be very applicable here. You'll almost always find the owner, so there would be a regular halacha of hashavas aveidah. That's why I said only in 2030 when we're exploding.
2026.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, shkayach everyone.